Hi friends, I'm Renay.
And I'm Diana.
And you're listening to Fangirl Happy Hour. Welcome back to Fangirl Happy Hour, friends. Thanks for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about the awards field for science fiction and fantasy, and also talk about our recent reading. I am here with my second chair, Diana. Thank you for coming on again, Diana.
Hello. I'm always happy to be here.
What has been up with you recently?
We were talking about this before we started recording, but this weekend, it's like a big thing in a bunch of different theaters. They're re-releasing the Lord of the Rings extended editions in movie theaters. It's one movie a day. So yesterday was Fellowship. As we're recording is Two Towers, and then tomorrow is Return of the King. And it's been a while since I've seen these movies. I think the last time I saw these movies was in 2011, 2012. I enjoy Lord of the Rings, but they're not like movies I gravitate towards. So it's been fun revisiting them and seeing how much I remember. Also, I got into making shrubs, aka drinking vinegar, because I really want like a refreshing summer bevy that isn't necessarily alcoholic. And I made one and I had it yesterday and it was delicious. I made a strawberry basil.
That sounds delicious.
It was so good and so refreshing. So I talked about how I am. How are you?
I am doing well. I am recovering from Pride Fest. We had Northeast Arkansas Pride Fest here over the weekend. I was one of the organizers for my county party's booth at Pride Fest, which seems to happen. Like last year I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm so tired. And then this year, guess what? I ended up doing it. It's so hot here. And obviously climate change is making things uncertain. And the rain is way more unpredictable. It has rained like every single Saturday for like 2 months. And that makes it really hard for like outdoor festivals. And it didn't used to be that way. Even a few years ago, it wasn't that bad. We set everything up in the rain, and then it rained most of the morning. It was still raining when I came home to nap. And by the time I woke up, the rain had cleared out and it was sunny and hot. We literally took an umbrella back to the festival and like zip tied it to the side of our tent. So because we had some people at our booth collecting signatures for petitions, because Arkansas is one of those states where citizens can put ballot issues on the ballot for everybody to vote on. It's very difficult, but they were just standing in the baking sun. So we MacGyvered the umbrella to the side of the tent and it worked great. But yeah, it was just very hot and humid. And then the sun went down and it was just like everything was moist. Overall, Pride was wonderful. Obviously, like right now, we have a ton of candidates that are running. Like my friend David, he is running for State House. He, if elected, will be the first gay man to be elected to the State House here in Arkansas. David's a great guy. And then our JP candidates, for the first time in ever, I think, all our JP candidates are women except for one.
That's cool.
I think that's a huge accomplishment, considering that even 2 cycles ago, we couldn't get anybody to run for JP. So JP is Justice of the Peace. It is for the Quorum Court. Quorum Courts are generally county government. I don't know what they're called elsewhere, but here they're called Justices of the Peace. And we have fully Republican Quorum Court. The fact that we could have we could have tons of our JPs at Pride Fest, meeting the voters, meeting people. Like I met this one young lady, and she was like, "Can you tell me who is running on your ticket this cycle, because I'm ready to vote again and I want to vote for as many progressive people as possible." And it was so inspiring to get to tell her, this is your JP, it's a woman. This is your State House candidate. It's a man, but he's like an out gay man running for State House. If elected, he'll be the first one ever to be sent to Little Rock to represent his community. And it was just so wonderful, because obviously for reasons, Biden is not popular right now.
No fucking shit.
So yeah, Pride Fest, it's always great. They had 6,000 people attend. It was like a record number of attendees, a record number of vendors. I had a lot of fun.
That's exciting.
I had a funnel cake and a gator dog.
Huh.
To be clear, not at the same time. Other than Pride Fest, I am still dealing with new kitten energy, which has been a lot. I forget how energetic kittens are, and he is a ball of energy.
He's a baby. That's what he is.
But I'm very tired. I'm very sleepy. Ezio, let me rest.
No.
With that out of the way, we are here today to talk about science fiction and fantasy awards. So we're talking about awards for the things that were released last year in 2023. So far, 6 awards have been given. There are still a lot more to come. It's very, very early in the award season cycle. And I care a lot about the Hugo Awards. But as we all know, last year, there was some
shenanigans
with the awards where the white members of the Hugo admin team decided to go fully mask off racist. It wasn't a great look. I am largely on TikTok as my social media platform of choice these days, and the number of comments that I read of people going, well, I'm just not going to be paying attention to the Hugos anymore, was very disheartening. Way to undermine the entire award forever. Good work, y'all.
Yeah, it was bad.
Plenty of people have said a lot about that. I've said a lot about that. I wrote a lot about it on Lady Business as it was happening. And one of the things that happened around that time for me was like, at some point, the Hugo Awards became like the main focus of my award energy. But when I first got back into science fiction and fantasy, the thing that I did was look at all the awards. I would look at all of them. I would look at like who won, what the short list was like, was there a long list? And I would look at them all as one thing. And I kind of moved away from doing that as I got more and more into the Hugo Awards. But I was like, why don't I just go back to doing it the way I was doing it before? Because I think if you look at the whole field and all the awards, it can feel a lot more optimistic than just looking at one award and how that one award is fucking up or not fucking up year to year. And so I thought, hey, let's talk about the awards field for 2024 and see how we're doing. Diana, what are your feelings about the awards field so far this year?
I feel like this year there isn't really a consent. I think there isn't so much as a consensus. Like looking at the list that we have, there's a lot of different winners. The only repeat winner we have so far is The Saint of Bright Doors by Vajra Chandrasekhara. So he won the William Crawford and just won a Nebula, and that book is also up for a Hugo. So I think that's like the closest we have to kind of the front runner. But I feel like last year was like, for me, it felt like a weird year for SFF novels, where there's things that people enjoyed, but there wasn't like kind of a consensus, oh my god, this is amazing.
I agree. To get into the awards that have been announced so far, the first award is the Crawford Award. This is the IAFA Fantasy Awards. This is given at a convention, I think that happened this year in Florida. I'm pretty sure it was in Florida. And the nominees for the Crawford Award were The Saint of Bright Doors by Vajra Chandrasekhara, Dry Land by B. Platek, Ink, Blood, Sister Scribe by Emma Turge, Shigiti and the Breast Head of Obalafon by Wole Talabi, Summer Fishing in Lapland by Juhani Kurilla. And I have only read one of these, and that is The Saint of Bright Doors. Have you read any of these?
I finished The Saint of Bright Doors earlier this week, actually. So I have read that, and that is the only one of these that I have read.
So the things that are jumping out for me from this list is Shigiti and the Breast Head of Obalafon by Wole Talabi. And this is because it is nominated for several other awards. It's going to come up again.
Mm-hmm.
So far, it has 4 other nominations. And so I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to end up doing. Just getting nominated doesn't mean anything. Like, you can have like 7 nominations and win 0 things. But I thought it was interesting that that book, along with The Saint of Bright Doors, is showing up all over the place. The next award is Philip K. Dick, and the nominees for that one are These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs, Danged Black Thing by Eugene Bacon, Infinity Gate by M.R. Carey, Where Rivers Go to Die by Dilman Dilla, and Wild Spaces by S.L. Coney. And I can say that I have not read any of these.
I haven't read any of these. I've heard good things about these Burning Stars, but yeah, I have not read any of these.
Oh yeah, so Philip K. Dick is already awarded, and I should go back. For the Crawford Award, The Saint and Brat Doors won the Crawford Award, and that was one of its first wins. Then for the Philip K. Dick Award, These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs won the Philip K. Dick Award. And yeah, I've also not read any of these because I have been like hyper focused on the Hugos for so long. But yeah, I've also heard a lot of great things about These Burning Stars. And then the British SF Association Awards, or the BSFA. The nominees were The Green Man's Quarry by Juliet E. McKenna, Airside by Christopher Priest, Descendant Machine by Gareth L. Powell, Him by Jeff Ryman, Shigidi and the Breasthead of Obalafon by Wole Talabi. For this one, The Green Man's Quarry by Juliet E. McKenna won. This is the only award it was nominated for so far, and it won. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I will say, aside from Shigidi, I have not heard of any of the BSFA award nominees.
And I don't know if this is accurate. Again, this is just from my perspective, and my perspective is very limited. Sometimes this award, I don't pay as close attention to it because it tends to be like lots of white dudes. And again, I'm very picky when it comes to books by women. I hadn't heard of any of these until I read the list, except for Shigidi and the Breasthead of Obalafon. But congratulations to Juliet E. McKenna. She is a very outspoken advocate for women writers on social media. And she's always been very much like women deserve more attention, women deserve more awards. And so I'm very happy that her book is getting this type of recognition. She's been writing for a long time. The unfortunate part for me is that I don't find the cover great. Yes, I'm very shallow. I'm going to admit it now. I do care about covers. The next award is the Compton Crook Award.
Yeah, so the Compton Crook Award is for Best Debut Novel.
The nominees for this award are The Splinter in the Sky by Kemi Ashingiwa, Death Wind by Brad Pawlowski, How to Be Remembered by Michael Thompson, These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs, and To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose. And the book that won this award is The Splinter in the Sky by Kemi Ashingiwa.
This is one I've been meaning to read. I just have not gotten around to it.
Interestingly, again, for this award, The Splinter in the Sky was nominated for this award and won this award. And so far, this is the only nomination that this book has had this year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's very early in the year. Some awards I'm not even sure have a shortlist yet, so things could change. I remember this getting a lot of hype when it first dropped. So, and again, on this one, we have These Burning Stars, which showed up again, and To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose, which will also come up again. This is one where I actually had not really paid much attention to this one before, so it was kind of like discovering a whole archive to dig through, because you can go and look up all the previous books that they've nominated and awarded. So it was really interesting to go back to their archives and look at it. They're doing some really interesting things with that award. Compton Crook is what it's called, and you can find all of their archives on the Science Fiction Award database, sfadb.com. I don't know who maintains the database, but thank you very much for your service. The next award is the Aurealis Award. This is for material published in Australia, and it does not get a lot of attention in the US market for obvious reasons, because we're all very conceited Americans. I include myself in that. So this is the first award that I follow that has multiple different categories, and they also kind of mix horror into their categories as well. And I don't really track horror awards because I'm a big wimp, because I don't want to have nightmares. So there's multiple categories for the Aurealis. So for SF novel, the nominees are Time of the Cat by Tansy Rayner Roberts, Aliens Bishop by T.R. Napper, The Comforting Weight of Water by Roanna McClelland, Dronicus by Marco Newman, Minds of Sand and Light by Kylie Chan, and Trader's Run by Keith Stevenson. And for this category, Time of the Cat by Tansy Rayner Roberts won that award.
I have not heard of any of these books.
That's going to be a theme, I think.
I know.
And another reason that I'm very happy that I'm getting back into looking at other awards, because wow, there's a lot being published out there that I was not aware of. And T.R. Napper has another book called 36 Streets, I think, that sounds extremely interesting. I read the blurb and I was like, that sounds fascinating. So I may end up reading his other work. I'm not really interested in spin-offs from IP. The next was SF Novella. The nominees for this one were Once We Flew by Nikki Lee, Bitters by Karen Warren, Aider Da by Thoraya Dyer, Kilwar by Tim Hawken, The Last to Go by A.D. Lyle, and Showdown on Planetoid Pincrux by Garth Nix. Again, since these are Australian awards, I was very unsurprised to find that I had never heard of any of these. Although I am familiar with some of these authors, like Garth Nix, Thoraya Dyer, and Karen Warren. So if you're looking for interesting books that are science fiction, fantasy, horror, you could do worse than going to look at the Aurealis Award list archives, because there's a ton of stuff there that's probably just not getting marketing here in the US. And the SF Novella winner for that one was Once We Flew by Nikki Lee. The fantasy novel, the nominees are The Will of the Many by James Islington, The Blood-Born Dragon by J.C. Rycroft, How to Be Remembered by Michael Thompson, Of Knives and Night Blooms by Tansy Rayner Roberts, Shadow Baron by Davinia Evans, and The Sinister Booksellers of Bath by Garth Nix. And The Will of the Many by James Islington won that award.
The Will of the Many is one that I've been seeing getting buzz on BookTube, but they've also been like, yeah, it's for people who like Red Rising, and I've heard from reputable sources that I would hate Red Rising. I don't know. I might read both of them just to see. Yeah, it's one where, like, I've heard people talk about The Will of the Many. And what I find interesting here is the Sinister Booksellers of Bath. I don't know if they like have a separate YA award, but the Sinister Booksellers of Bath is nominated for a Lodestar with the Hugos this year.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the Aurealis. I don't know. Maybe the Australian field is not so snobby about YA. Shadow Baron is a sequel to a book that got some hype here last year called Notorious Sorcerer. I was actually extremely excited about Notorious Sorcerer, and then life happened and reading slumps happened, so I haven't read it yet. This is a sequel, and I'm excited because I really like the sound of the first book. So if I like the first book, I immediately get to go read the sequel if I love it. So hooray. But yeah, I have also seen a lot of buzz for The Will of the Many on Book Talk, and I generally trust their taste. I don't know, maybe.
Some of the people I've seen hyping Will of the Many are people who like love Red Rising. And again, I have been told that Red Rising would be a book that I would deeply hate for various reasons.
Yeah, but is it like content or vibes? Because content, red flag. Vibes, maybe not. It can depend. I think the solution here is just for us to give Jenny some money and be like, Jenny, our friend, read this book and then tell us all the warnings for it. We'll pay you to do this. The Will of the Many is also only so far nominated for this award. It won it, but it has no other nominations so far. So I'm curious to see how far, like how widely it will be read over here.
Although The Will of the Many is released by Saga here, and it, like I said, it's one that I've seen people hype up. So I do think people are reading it. I just don't think that it's hit the Hugo Awards folks.
And it really depends too, like about like who are nominating for the Hugos. This is why nominations really matter, right? So if you're like if you're in a smaller market and there's books that you really care about and you're not nominating for the Hugos, they're just not going to be there. It just really depends on who nominates.
It's not nominated for a Locus, which is the other award I could see it being nominated for.
The next category is fantasy novella, and the nominees for that are Gate Sinister by Tansy Rayner Roberts, Whole World by J.S. Brucklar, The Leaves Forgot by Alan Baxter, A Marked Man by T.R. Napper, A Wicked Blade by Tansy Rayner Roberts, and The Wizard Must Be Stopped by Talon Carver. Tansy Rayner Roberts won this with Gate Sinister, and a lot of her works in this are self-published. So she's winning these awards with self-published works. And so I am out here going, publishers, why are you guys sleeping on Tansy Rayner Roberts? What's happening? Give her money to write what she wants.
It's because I've heard people talk a lot about her work and really like it. And I think it's just one of those, I don't know if she prefers to self-pub, kind of like Ursula Vernon has been self-pubbing her World of the White Rat. And then like in the UK, she licensed them to Orbit to be the publisher, or if it's like publishers just are not pick. I don't know.
But if it is like a publishers are like pass, y'all are fired. Tansy's a great writer. She's also really good at marketing. Like, why are you sleeping on her? But to be clear, I also have not read this, although I follow Tansy everywhere. I'm sorry that I was in a reading slump. The next award was just given out. It's the Nebula Awards, which is the SFF award that the professionals give to each other. the novel category, the nominees were The Saint of Brat Doors by Vaja Chandrakesera, Shigidi and the Brass Head of Ubalafan by Wole Talabi, The Terraformers by Annalie Newitz, Translation State by Anne Leckie, The Water Outlaws by Elsa Huang, and The Witch King by Martha Wells. And the winner of this category was The Saint of Brat Doors by Vaja Chandrakesera. How surprised were you?
I mean, I actually was surprised. I didn't know who was going to win this because, like, I would say Annalie Newitz, Anne Leckie, and Martha Wells are who I would consider, like, industry darlings. They're people that folks really like and have won awards before. So I was actually kind of expecting one of them to win, but I was really pleasantly surprised with The Saint of Bright Doors. I mentioned that I had just read this, and I think it did some interesting things with narrative and storytelling and like what it was trying to tell and how it was engaging in Sri Lankan history. And like overall, I really enjoyed it. So I was really happy to see it win, and I'm really interested to see if it will lead to some momentum going into the Hugo, since voting doesn't close for over a month.
Because, like, at this point, there's only a few weeks left for reading. So if people are still behind on novels, are they going to pick up some of the other novels on the Hugo novel ballot, or are they going to pick up the one that just won the Nebula? In TV, you have awards that if they're given, they kind of predict the way the Oscars are going to go. And I feel like the Nebula does that for the Hugos in some years.
If The Saint of Bright Doors wins, I would be really happy. Like, I've only read 2 of the nominees for Best Novel Hugo, but like I think The Saint of Bright Doors is really good.
Agreed. Then we have the novella category, and the nominees there were The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill, Ling Hun by Ah Jiang, Mammoths at the Gate by Niveau, The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malcolm Older, Thornhedge by Teen Kingfisher, and The Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. And the winner in this category was Ling Hun by Ah Jiang.
I haven't read this one, but I think it's in the Hugo Voters packet because Ah Jiang is nominated for the Astounding Award. IMAI is under Best Novelette for the Hugos.
Ah Jiang is also nominated in the novelette category at the Nebulas for IMAI. And I am tracking that story in other categories for other awards because they put it in their novella category. But for the Nebulas, they put it in the novelette.
It's a novelette for the Hugos as well.
Oh, is it? Okay, so I need to go add it to that one as well. But in other awards, it's definitely like in other categories.
It's novelette for the Locus Awards as well.
So I've tracked it so far in the Aurora Award, the BSFA for short fiction, and Nebula for novelette. They might not distinguish between like novelette and novella. That might be where the confusion for me is coming from. All the awards have different structures and different like lengths for stuff. I know like we're very used to like the Hugo category limits, but other awards definitely do it differently. I was excited to see The Mimicking of Known Successes here. I read that and I really liked it. And finally, I'm going to get around to reading Niveau because everybody loves all these different novellas. And I have not read one of them, but every time a new one gets announced, it's like a celebration everywhere around me. I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm definitely missing out on something here.
One of the things with this series is they're all pretty standalone, so you don't need to read them in order. Like, I would say definitely read Empress of Salt and Fortune first. And then if you just want to read Mammoths at the Gate, just so you can read what's nominated for the Hugos, you can definitely do that and then go back and read When the Tiger Came Down from the Mountain and Into the Riverlands.
Got it. Great. And although for the Nebula, I wasn't like actually tracking the novelette, the winner of the novelette category was The Year Without Sunshine by Naomi Kritzer, which I have read and I thought was perfectly lovely.
I haven't read that yet. I need to, maybe when I get home from Lord of the Rings tonight, I'll try and read the novelette nominees.
The Year Without Sunshine is not very long. I read it very quickly in like an hour. I don't think of it as like explicit science fiction and fantasy. It's more like near future speculation about like what community could look like. And I thought it was very well done and heartwarming. I think we can all use something heartwarming right now. And then finally, the Andre Norton Award, which is given out at the Nebulas. The nominees were The Ghost Job by Greg Van Eckhout, The Inn at the Amethyst Lantern by J. Diane Dotson, Liberty's Daughter by Naomi Kritzer, and To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose. And To Shape a Dragon's Breath won this category.
In the past, the Andre Norton Award has had some really good nominees, but I feel like this year was just weird. this is something with both the Lodestar and the Andre Norton, because I feel like none of these are books that I've heard like people who will read and talk about YA middle grade talk about. This is like my own personal soapbox. To Shape a Dragon's Breath is published by Del Rey. Del Rey is an adult imprint, and it's really frustrating for me that this keeps happening because there is so much good YA and middle grade being published, and I wish that was being recognized.
Yeah, I'm also frustrated about this category because I read Liberty's Daughter, and I don't read this as YA at all. It does not feel like YA to me. It has some of the same beats, like coming of age and going up against some toxic power structures, but I don't read it as young adult. Again, with the publisher, I don't think, does Fairview Press do YA? It doesn't seem to be marketed as YA at all. So it's just very weird to me that people seem to be doing this whole, if it's a young teenage protagonist, it's automatically YA.
Yeah, and like the Anna at the Amethyst Lantern, I had never even heard of. I think it's self-pubbed, or it's like a very small press.
But again, the Nebula Awards are for professionals to award professionals. So if professionals want to award their peers who are writing science fiction and fantasy as YA, you know what? I guess.
Again, it's frustrating because I'm looking at the Locus Awards, and this is who we have for the Locus Awards. Promise is Stronger Than Darkness by Charlie Jane Anders. Charlie Jane Anders is Hugo Darling. I am not surprised that she was on the Lodestar list. She is actually writing YA. We have The Making of Yolanda la Bruja by Lorena Avila, which is from Levine Corrido, which is a indie press, like a smaller press that does both YA and middle grade. Damned If You Do by Alex Brown. A Song of Salvation by Alicia Dow, which I've heard good things about. The Library of Broken Worlds by Alea Dawn Johnson. The Sinister Booksellers of Bath by Garth Nix, also a Lodestar nominee. Into the Light by Mark Oshiro, a SMP title that I'm not going to name. The Siren, the Song, and the Spy by Maggie Tokuda Hall. And The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. All of those in the Locus Awards are actual YA. All of those are books that I have heard people talk about.
Yeah, I've heard on BookTok I follow several people who read YA, and again, at least 3 of these are very popular. Like The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White is extremely popular with people who read YA on BookTok. This is just a case of maybe the Nebula folks do not consider YA writers their peers, and they're not reading their work.
Like, this is one where in the past they've actually done a good job. So last year, K. Tempest Bradford won for Ruby Finley versus the Interstellar Invasion. Although last year they also were doing, I don't want to say obscure, they were doing books that weren't as well known, but they were all YA, or they were all from publishers that do YA or middle grade. Darcy Little Badger won for A Snake Falls to Earth in 2022. Again, all those books are YA or middle grade. Ursula Vernon won for A Wizard's Guide for Defensive Baking. In the past, the Andre Norton Award has actually been pretty good about having actual YA in middle grade. This year just feels like a weird aberration. Although in 2016, they did give it to Fran Wilde for Updraft, which, as far as I'm aware, is not a YA book. That beat Nimona. I'm sorry, that is a little offensive to me as a Nimona fan, but whatever.
I wonder if Updraft was like one of those crossover things, like the Alex Award.
Sister Mine won in 2024. That is also not a YA. Or in 2014, I mean.
They were doing badly, and then they improved, but now they're doing badly again. There's really no excuse for this, because Alex Brown at Reactor, they release like a list of YA titles regularly that are coming out.
Oh yeah, Alex Brown is one of my go-to resources for what's being published right now. And they also, because they work at a high school, they also talk about, you know, the books that are popular that the kids at their school are reading. And so I really recommend checking out Alex Brown's Blue Sky, Twitter, blog, and their Reactor column, just because they're such a good resource for current YA.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The Locus Awards aren't going to be awarded for a few more weeks, but their finalist categories are really interesting.
Well, I think also because they split things up between science fiction and fantasy, you get a much larger range.
So for science fiction novel for the Locus Award, the nominees are The Djinn Bart of Shantipur by Samit Basu, A Fire, Born of Exile by Eliot de Bordard. Red Team Blues by Cory Doctorow. Furious Heaven by Kate Elliott. Translation State by Anne Leckie. The Terraformers by Annalee Newitz. Starter Villain by John Scalzi. Lords of Uncreation by Adrian Tchaikovsky. System Collapse by Martha Wells. The Road to Roswell by Connie Willis. Interesting to me on this list is that Martha Wells took a nomination for System Collapse. Do you get to reject your Locust nomination if you don't want it? Because I think she turned down a nomination for System Collapse for the Hugos, right?
She did. Yeah, so she turned it down for System Collapse.
So this is a very interesting list because there's a lot of different wide-ranging things. The Genbot Ashantiport is extremely different than Starter Villain. And Starter Villain is extremely different to System Collapse. And I have no clue how to predict how this will go because I don't actually know how. I don't have a good read on who votes for the Locusts.
I will say one of the things I'm most excited about with the Hugos is getting the long list because I want to see how close some things were.
If there's something awesome in the spot right under the ballot, I'm going to be upset.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested about the novel as well as the Lodestar.
Oh, in Locust Fantasy Novel, To Shape a Dragon's Breath is nominated in the fantasy novel category at the Locusts.
And not why I noticed that. I noticed that.
Although, unfortunately for our friend Rosianna, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies is nominated in fantasy category. I remember reading Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I really liked it. It was way darker and more fairies are scary than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be some kind of cozy fantasy story, but it ended up being much more kind of bleak and pessimistic than that. But, then we talked to Rosianna and she was like, no, all the Oxford stuff is wrong. And I was just like, okay, fair. You're fair. You're right. Feels like, maybe it's Oxford fanfic.
I don't understand how Oxford and Cambridge work. I understand how American and Canadian universities work.
Same. So of course, this is why it's so that book is so successful over here because we're just like, blah blah. How does this work? It sounds great. I don't know how I feel about. I already every year I'm going to be annoyed at the way that they treat YA work. Just take it seriously as books.
Never.
Put it in the right category.
Never. That's the thing that annoys me so much about actually liking the Scholomance books is I wouldn't be so annoyed had it not been for them being in the Lodestar.
I understand. So besides the Locust, the other awards that have shortlists that I'm not going to read here, but they do have them available if you want to look them up, are the Lambda Awards, which are awards for LGBTQ books. The Arthur C. Clarke Award, which is the best SF novel in the UK. The Aurora Awards for best Canadian SFF. All of those are available at sfadb.com. There's a lot of awards.
There are.
I was looking at the stats for some of the books that I was tracking. The Saint of Bright Doors has 6 nominations so far. To Shape a Dragon's Breath has 5. Shigidi and the Brass Head of Obalithon has 4. And then after that, there are several books that have 3, like These Burning Stars, Chain Gang All-Stars, Mammoth at the Gate, Some Desperate Glory, The Mimicking of Known Successes, The Sinister Booksellers of Bath, Thornhedge, Translation State, Witch King. So, and then after that, everything just drops off and it becomes 2 nominations, 1 nomination. Your point about there not being a consensus so far is true. Of all of those books, almost all of them have no wins or 1 win, but The Saint of Bright Doors has 2 wins now.
I think The Saint of Bright Doors is the closest. I don't know if we'll ever see another period like when N.K. Jemisin was releasing the Broken Earth trilogy, where it was just it felt everyone was agreeing yes, this book, this series. And I don't know if we'll ever see that again.
Yeah, maybe not for years and years. That felt like a very special time, both as recognizing that she was doing this really amazing work, but also recognizing that while there was other good work, the work that she was doing was elevating what you could use science fiction and fantasy to do, and the stories you could use it to tell way beyond what other books at the time were doing. It felt very special, and it felt like something that only really happens once in a long time.
Yeah.
So out of all the books we've talked about and the awards we've talked about, What do you think is going to happen at the end of the season? Like, do you think we're gonna have a consensus with the St. and Brett Doors? Do you think there's going to be like a surprise dark horse?
I would really love for the St. of Bright Doors to win. I think, thinking about the Hugo shortlist, one that could potentially win is Witch King by Martha Wells. I think that one is a definite possibility. I would be deeply annoyed if Starter Villain won, but I don't put it outside the realm of possibility.
The farther I get away from Starter Villain, the more I'm like, ugh. And I feel bad about it, but
I would say right now, the 3 books I could pretty easily see winning are St. of Bright Doors because it has the momentum from the Nebula. And I also think it's just doing a lot of really cool stuff. Translation State by Anne Leckie, which I have not read, but it is a new Imperial Rock book. People love Anne Leckie. And Witch King by Martha Wells.
I think that maybe that some Desperate Glory may come up from behind, although it is extremely dark, which is the only reason that I think I might be wrong. Very, very dark book. Trigger warnings everywhere. But it got a lot of buzz last year. A lot of people who are very active in the Hugo circles, and it's nominated for the Locust and the Clark and the Hugo. If people can get past the darkness of it, like, I'm kind of curious how it will do too, because it got so much buzz last year. I saw more about it than I did about the St. and Brett Doors. But again, times change, so I'm just curious to see where it'll end up. And another one that has several nominations outside of the Nebula and the Hugo is Chain Gang All Stars.
I've heard very good things about.
It seems extremely interesting, also extremely violent. Trigger warnings again. It's nominated for the Clark, it's nominated in the Locust debut category, and it's also nominated for the Subjective Chaos Awards, which is a set of awards by science fiction and fantasy fans. Very interesting to see what happens with Chain Gang All Stars. Again, we're still really, really early in the award season. Some of the awards haven't even announced their shortlist yet, so who knows where we may go from here. It's an adventure. It's a wide open field. Next up, we're going to talk about our recent reading. Diana, what have you been reading?
So speaking of awards and things that were snubbed from awards, earlier this year, I read The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This is a epic fantasy story that is like a story within a story, potentially within another story. So like there's layers to this. The framing device is our one character who's going to what's called the inverted theater to see this story. And it's a story about these 2 young men who are escorting a dying moon goddess to the ocean and dealing with the emperor and his 3 children, these 3 monsters. And it's a story about colonization, hope. What does it mean to seek redemption? What does it mean to exist in the world and these choices? And it like goes from first person to second person to third person. It's just beautiful and epic, and I read it and loved it. It's one of my top books of the year so far, and it wasn't nominated for a lot of awards. And I just like, I'm reading it and I'm like, okay, how was this book not nominated for a Hugo, but Legends and Lattes was? Because Legends and Lattes for me is like the definition of extremely mid fantasy. Legends and Latte reads like a nano book that was turned around in 3 months to be self-published, which it was. And like, that is fine if you do that, but it does not make it Hugo worthy. And that is a rant for a different time. But yeah, Spear Cuts Through Water is just so good. And it's like dealing with all these different themes. The audiobook is fantastic. I really loved the characters and again, how it handled the topic of redemption and how it brought familial legacy and trauma and all of that. It's just so good.
The Spear Cuts Through Water was nominated for the Crawford Award, the Ignite Award, the British Fantasy Award, and it won the British Fantasy Award and the Crawford Award.
Okay, so it did win 2 awards. I knew it won the British Fantasy, but it felt like it was snubbed by a lot of awards.
It did not get a lot of nominations, no.
Yeah, it's definitely one where I think it was doing a lot of really interesting things with how it approached fantasy and how it was playing with stories as an oral tradition. So it is one I wish had been nominated for the Hugo instead of Legends and Lattes. And then a book I finished recently was The Death I Gave Him by MX Liu. This is a book that was published last year. Lou is nominated for the Astounding Award this year for Best New Author. I had read their novella, If Found, Return to Hell, and I really liked it. And so I heard this was like a science fiction, like near future sci-fi Hamlet retelling. It's one where I can see what they were doing with the story, but the way it was executed left me asking questions that weren't resolved. So the way this book is, like, yes, it's a Hamlet retelling. There's been a death at Elsinore Laboratories. They're working on this compound that will extend life and basically stop people from dying. Anyway, so the Hamlet character is, like, Hayden, is trying to figure out what happened, and there's an AI named Horatio, and he's trying to figure out, like, who killed his dad. But the way it's framed is like this academic text that someone in the future wrote. So you get these footnotes and you get like, this is based off of speculation. And what we see in those footnotes and the introduction that the fake author wrote is like this really interesting like setup that doesn't necessarily get delivered on, in my opinion. I was really confused about that, and the ending I was a little unsatisfied with. But, I mean, it's definitely interesting, and I really liked their novella. I think their novella is actually better. But I am happy that they got nominated for the Astounding Award. The last thing that I read, this was actually something I read back in March, but I wanted to talk about some nonfiction that I was reading, and this is The Latinos of Asia, How Filipino Americans Break the Rules on Race by Anthony Christian Ocampo. And so this is a nonfiction book that was published back in 2016. It's based off of Ocampo's doctoral dissertation, and it's basically looking at Filipino Americans, particularly in two areas in Los Angeles, but kind of talking about how they don't necessarily fit within like how the US conceptualizes Asian Americans, and how they in certain aspects more fit in with Latinos, particularly because like they were both colonized by Spain. They have that influence. They also have like colonial influence of the United States. And so there's like a lot of emphasis on English and quote unquote like American values, and they weren't necessarily subjected to the same immigration laws at various points that other Asians were. And so it was really interesting, and I was reading this when I was hanging out with my tata, and I was talking to him about it because, you know, he's a former Chicano studies professor, and he mentioned when he was growing up in Phoenix, one of his dad's coworkers was Filipino who had married a Mexican woman. Because of immigration laws, there weren't always a lot of Filipinas in the US, and also because of miscegenation laws at the time. And so, like, Filipino and Mexican, or like Filipino and other Latino marriages were pretty common. It helped put some things in perspective. But it's also harder to track down because it is an academic text.
You would think that academic publishers would be like, let's do an audiobook release or something. Like, let's make our books more widely available and maybe more people would read them.
I wish. Anyway, so that's what I've been reading.
So, of course, I've been busy, so I haven't been able to read a lot of things. The first thing I read, I cannot talk about because it is a Speak Up Assembly block. We are not talking about St. Martin's Press titles on this podcast because St. Martin's Press has continually ignored the Readers for Accountability that are asking them to take accountability for the behavior of some of their staff. So if you want to learn more, you can look up Readers for Accountability, but I cannot mention this book. I got it from the library. I read it. It went from a 3.5 star to a 1 star within one chapter. The next thing I read as a palate cleanser was Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This is a title that comes out on September 17th of 2024. I read it as an ARC, and it sounded extremely cute. It is about a witch who has kind of lost her magical spark and has to go back to her coven to be like tested to see if she can gets to keep her magic, and a whole saga spools out from there. It's very heartwarming. When I first saw it, it was kind of marketed as a romance, but the romance is kind of secondary and reminds me more of the romance from the Society of Irregular Witches, where it's there, but not really so much until the end. Actually, this book has a lot in common with that book, now that I think about it. Although the Society of Irregular Witches feels like a little more cozy than this one did. But this one is very much like about friendship and finding yourself and having confidence. It was very cute. And then the last thing I read was more of my Hugo reading that I'm still trying to do in hopes of finishing it maybe before the deadline. I read Better Living Through Algorithms by Naomi Kritzer. This way is a piece of short fiction about a group of friends who download a app that helps them like make better life choices and like what happens when that app kind of takes over and what it means for society and also kind of how capitalism ruins everything. Ultimately, I thought the story was lovely, although it does kind of drive home the fact that capitalism sucks a lot.
Capitalism does suck.
This was published in Clark's World. It's very short. It doesn't take long to read. As always, Naomi Kritzer remains really good at writing about community and the lack of community. And that's what I've read. My section would have been longer if St. Martin's Press was less of a butthead.
St. Martin's Press is a butthead.
I think we're done.
That's it.
I think we're wrapped up.
I didn't talk about Dragon Age, but that's just because it just came out and I have to settle my thoughts.
Oh, right. They announced something new, huh?
They just released the trailer for the new game.
So Diana is excited about the Dragon Age trailer. I am excited about the trailer for Horizon Lego Adventures.
Yeah, that looks cute.
Where they turn Aloy into a Lego minifig and have her, go around a world of Lego, like Lego robot dinosaurs. Honestly, I'm going to play it. I'm pretty excited, actually.
It looks really cute.
That's it for this episode of Fangirl Happy Hour. If you have any books that you think may win awards, if you have opinions about awards, if you have facts about awards that we don't know and would maybe be interested in, you can email them to us. We would be happy to read your thoughts. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
I can fit 2 more bookshelves in my apartment and then I'm officially at capacity.
Uh-oh. I bet you could figure out a way. I bet you could.